Sophie's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., but she was already awake. Her calendar was packed. Back-to-back meetings, an investor pitch, a dinner with potential clients. Today was the day that could change everything. If she could close the deal, she'd finally land the promotion she had been chasing for years. No time for breakfast, no time for reflection. She grabbed her coffee and power walked toward the subway, her heels clicking against the pavement. The train doors were just about to close. She sprinted, reaching out, but they shut an inch before her fingers could touch them. Sophie let out a frustrated sigh as the train pulled away. She checked her watch. The next one wouldn't arrive for another 7 minutes. 7 whole minutes of wasted time. But as she exhaled, something inside her shifted. She felt an unfamiliar feeling. Stillness. For the first time in months, there was nothing she could do except wait. So, for the first time in months, she let herself pause. Sophie sat on the bench, sipping her coffee, checking her emails. That's when she noticed the older woman beside her. Calm, serene, looking at nothing in particular. Unlike Sophie, she wasn't rushing. She was simply being. The woman glanced over and smiled. "Missed the train?" Sophie nodded, still feeling the frustration simmering in her chest. "You know," the woman continued, "I used to believe that missing a train was bad luck. But then I realized, sometimes it's the universe telling you to slow down." Sophie smirked. "Tell that to my boss," the woman chuckled. "You remind me of myself 20 years ago. Always running, always chasing. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you just paused?" Sophie opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. "When was the last time?" The woman nodded knowingly. "Exactly." The train arrived. Sophie hesitated, feeling an odd pull to continue the conversation. But before she could say another word, the woman smiled and stood up. "Luck has a funny way of finding those who slow down enough to notice it," she said, stepping onto the train. Sophie barely processed the words as the doors closed behind her, and then she saw it. Sitting on the bench where the woman had been, a leather-bound notebook lay open. Her name was written on the first page. Her heart skipped a beat. How? She picked it up, flipping through the pages, feeling a chill rush over her. Inside, in neat handwriting, were notes, quotes, and reflections, almost as if someone had written advice specifically for her. And at the bottom of one page, the words that would change everything. "Your next step isn't forward, it's inward." Sophie exhaled. The woman, whoever she was right. For years, she had been moving at full speed, believing success meant never stopping. But what if the thing she needed most wasn't to push harder, but to pause? Instead of rushing to work, Sophie made a decision that felt completely unnatural. She took a detour. She found herself at a quiet cafe, something she never allowed herself in the morning. Sitting down with the notebook, she read more of the entries. They were filled with wisdom, reminders to breathe, to reflect, to notice life happening right now. And then, as if on cue, her phone rang. It was her assistant. "Sophie, where are you? The investor just canceled the morning meeting. Something came up on their end." Sophie froze. If she hadn't missed the train, she would have been rushing for a meeting that wasn't even happening. Had she really lost anything? For the first time in years, she let herself breathe. And that's when it happened. As she looked up, she locked eyes with a man across the cafe. He was deep in conversation with someone, but there was something familiar about him. Then it hit her. Elliot Jameson, the CEO of a rival company. The one whose partnership she had been chasing for months, but could never get a meeting with. And he was sitting right there just a few feet away. If she hadn't paused, if she had gotten on that train, she never would have seen him. Luck. It had found her. And this time, she wasn't about to waste it. Sophie hesitated for only a second before walking over. "Mr. Jameson," she said with a confident smile. "Sophie Bennett from Creative Edge Advertising?" He looked up, surprised. Then after a moment, he smiled. "Ah, the one who's been trying to get a meeting with me?" Sophie chuckled. "That's me." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Well, I've got 15 minutes. Let's hear what you've got." 15 minutes. No PowerPoint, no prepared speech, just her, a chance encounter, and a conversation that never would have happened if she hadn't paused. She took a deep breath and began. 3 weeks later, Sophie signed the biggest deal of her career. Not with the investor she had been chasing, but with Elliot Jameson. Her company skyrocketed. Her stress levels dropped. And most importantly, she learned something priceless. Rushing doesn't always get you where you need to be. Sometimes, the luckiest moments happen in the pauses, in the missed trains, in the unexpected conversations, in the quiet spaces where we finally slow down enough to notice opportunity. As she sat at her desk, looking at the leather notebook that had changed her life, she thought back to the woman at the train station. Had she left the notebook for Sophie on purpose? Was it truly chance? Or something more? Sophie smiled. She may never know. But one thing was certain. She would never underestimate the power of a pause again. In a world that tells us to move faster, chase harder, and never stop, sometimes the luckiest thing you can do is pause. Pause to notice. Pause to breathe. Pause to let luck catch up to you. Because the right opportunities aren't always ahead. Sometimes they're waiting, right where you are. You just have to slow down enough to see them.